Well, so in the book, I talk about the tech icon and this belief that somehow the brilliance isn't captured in one person. And it's usually male. And it does not serve us well because, there's a lot of social science that shows that all innovations are team-based. Even the people like Steve Jobs that you think of as being a brilliant solo entrepreneur, he actually worked very closely with a team. And what I'm very sad about is as we come to AI, which is exciting. I love that we're offering ideas. That's really what I'm about. But we're going back to this idea that there's one person.
When you think about leadership in tech, what comes to our mind? And, typically when we talk about leadership, entrepreneurship, we have this image of a white male like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. And unfortunately, because we are so biased, all of us, we neglect to notice leaders who don't meet that specific stereotype. And I felt that on myself as well. Welcome to From a Woman to a Leader. My name is Limor Bergman Gross, a former director of engineering, and I turn into executive coach for women in tech. And if you have ever felt stuck, overlooked, or like you're doing everything right but still not getting the recognition you deserve, this podcast is for you. Each episode brings real stories and practical strategies from women who have built bold, impactful careers on their own terms. If you want to grow your confidence, influence, and leadership without pretending to be someone you're not, hit subscribe and join me on Substack so you never miss an episode. Your next level starts here. In the episode today, I'm very honored and happy to talk with Telle Whitney. And for those who don't know Telle, I first of all highly recommend you to just go and Google her. She is the co-founder of the Grace Hopper Celebration. And the Grace Hopper Celebration is the biggest female in technology conference. It happens once a year, usually around September, October. In the US, it's huge. I've been there once. I've been there, I think, in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And Telle and her work has shaped how the industry thinks about inclusion, leadership, and power. And we talk in the episode today about confidence, but confidence without being someone you're not, without being extrovert, or the typical stereotype of a white male leader. We also talk about why meritocracy breaks down in practice and how women can advance and advocate for themselves without becoming someone they are not. I'm very proud of this episode, and I want to encourage you to listen if you want to change the tech industry, if you want to build a more inclusive culture, or if you're a woman yourself. You don't want to miss this episode. So are you ready? Let's dive right in. Hi, Telle. How are you? It's a pleasure having you here today.
It is lovely to meet you, and I'm really excited about our conversation.
Me too. And for those who are listening to us, we were supposed to record about a week or two ago, and we had a power outage, so I'm happy that we could find an alternate time that works.
It works great.
Yeah.
Today is good.
And I wanted to start, Telle, maybe by asking you something a little bit personal. So I remember that we talked last time, you kind of recovered from an injury. How are you?
I'm okay. It's, with the book, I was out on the road a lot, and I had just given a talk up in Seattle. I was at the airport, and I fell down the escalator. So it was not a pretty sight. I'm very lucky. The injuries were, I had lots of bruises and things like that, but I broke my right elbow and I had to cancel the rest of my talks for this fall. But I'm good. I'm driving. I'm again driving, and I'm out and about. So things are making progress.
That's great. I'm so happy to hear you're recovering and getting back to all the energy that you bring. That's wonderful to hear. I want to kind of, we're going to talk today about your incredible book, Rebooting Tech Culture. I highly recommend anyone here that listens to us that really cares about, creating a diverse culture to read that book. Highly recommend that. And I tell you,
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I read that book and I was like, yes. Like I really resonated with a lot of things that you shared there. And I wanted to ask you a question. So if you could delete one belief that still shapes the tech culture, what would it be?
Well, so in the book, I talk about the tech icon and this belief that somehow the brilliance is captured in one person. And it's usually male. And it does not serve us well because, there's a lot of social science that shows that all innovations are team-based. Even the people like Steve Jobs that you think of as being a brilliant solo entrepreneur, he actually worked very closely with a team. And what I'm very sad about is as we come to AI, which is exciting. I love that we're offering ideas. That's really what I'm about. But we're going back to this idea that there's one person.
Yeah.
I just heard something called cracker code or something like that. That these one people that are going to make or break these companies that are going to change the world. And it's sad to me that we're falling back on that because it has been too often something that's shown up in the tech industry.
Yes, definitely. There's this stereotype of what a leader is, and usually it's a white male. And Telle, you mentioned AI. So I use AI tools quite a lot, and for my podcast, I use AI tools to create like clips, and some of them they have features of creating like B-rolls. If you know what it is, it's like those images. And every time I use a tool that have these automatic B-rolls, it's always showing images of men in suit. So even AI is biased.
The first few lists that I saw come out about the leaders of AI were all men. The Time list came out about a month ago, and there's two extraordinary women on that list. Fei Li out of Stanford University and Lisa Su, who's the president of AMD. So at least we're seeing some extraordinary leaders show up. But we have gone back to this default where it's the way comes back from the roots of the tech industry, and it's not serving us.
Definitely. And you talk in the book a lot about meritocracy. So where does it break in practice?
I think that meritocracy is this belief that people are always pushed forward based on their merits. And there's a great book called Brotopia that Emily Chang from out of Bloomberg wrote about, and she goes through a fairly great analysis of meritocracy. But it's really that if you're in the right group, then maybe it is meritocracy. You only promote people who are doing great work. But if you're one of the others and you don't look the same as everybody else, you definitely don't feel like it's a meritocracy. And as your ideas come forward, they're either ignored or pushed aside. And that's why meritocracy is really a myth.
Sure. And I can tell you that I felt it firsthand, and I've seen around me. And I will say, though, usually it doesn't happen because ill intentions. Most of the times, no one is trying to hurt anyone. But what happens is I'm very shy, introverted, I'm relatively quiet person. So in my career, I just did my job, and I saw men around me that are not more capable, but I saw them being promoted and getting opportunities that I didn't get. So it's really important to talk about it yes, leader doesn't look the same, doesn't have one persona.
Right. And it's, I think that's the people who are saying that it's a meritocracy, they're not bad people. They're not really setting up an agenda. I completely agree. It's often just because it's where they're comfortable. And so that's where they stick. There are some exceptions. Some people set out to be mean, but for the most part, it's really unconsciousness, not so much as anything else.
And you mentioned mean, and I wanted to ask you a question. So you told a story in the book about a person you called him Otto. Remember that? And that kind of stood out for me because I met several Ottos in my career.
I've had several people tell me that. And it is this experience. And it was a very profound experience even at the time because I stood up to him in private, which in hindsight was a mistake because what that didn't set boundaries for my entire team. And after that, things changed. And it is too bad. But it is this belief that in order to prove that you're great, you have to demean somebody, especially who's powerful or in position of authority, in order to put them down, in order for you to succeed. And it's not exactly something that I appreciate.
Definitely. And just for those of us who haven't read the book, so Otto was like a disrespectful, he didn't treat you well, maybe even shamed you. I don't know exactly like what was the exact, but kind of,
Yes, he was one of the engineers. This was at a company when we were building a voice over IP processor. It was, 2000 was the time period, and it was a really exciting project. And there was 3 teams: the chip team, the software team, and the application team. And he was part of the application team. We were talking about the development of this application. And yes, he was very mean-spirited. He, in front of my entire team, complained about how my knowledge. I am not a DSP engineer. I was the leader. And yet he really made a point of saying, this person doesn't know X, Y, Z. Let me just show you how incompetent they are.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's still happening. It happened to me as well. And what would you say a woman that is experiencing something similar to your story? You mentioned like you tried to kind of confront him in person. What would you do differently today?
Well, I would have said something compassionately. It doesn't help if my behavior models his behavior. So compassionately set boundaries and explained why what he was saying had in our team. That's the thing, is that the whole entire results and the outcomes for this company was that the team came together, and he really impacted the feeling of a team. So that's the first thing is in public, I would push back much harder. But I would tell you that for people who have this occur to them, first of all, learn how to push back, to be respectful, but to push back. And for those of you who are in the room, speak up on behalf of your colleagues. I think it's all too often people do not stand up for the people they work with. And those are the 2 things that I would really encourage you. My friend Karen Caitlin talks a lot about how the words that you can use. She has something called Better Allies, and she works a lot with male allies. And she talks about language that you can adopt in terms of how to get your voice heard.
Yeah, and I think that allies are very important, and most of them in my career were men. So usually the men are the best allies, especially men in positions of power. And I would say that one of the things I've seen, unfortunately, when there are people like Otto, but they are smart, they produce good work, so the company kind of ignore that toxic behavior just because he's a good engineer. So we don't want to kind of do anything about it.
That's very common. And it's not just about behavior in terms of the product. One of the stories that I told anonymously in the book is about somebody who worked at a large company, one of the big tech companies. Somebody was harassing her, and her management decided not to pursue it because they felt like he had too many important ideas to contribute to the product. And so think about what that tells your employee, that even though he's harassing you, that you're going to ignore it. So just be aware that every decision that you make has much broader impact than you think.
And it's detrimental to the people that are impacted by those people, right? It hurts.
Right.
It hurts you, not just like your feeling, it hurts your confidence.
Right. For most people, they do walk away often with their confidence. Shattered may not be too strong of a word, but it really impacts their confidence. I agree with you.
Sure. And that leads me to the next question I wanted to ask you about confidence. So you mentioned in the book, confidence should not be confused with extroversion. And I really like that sentence because like the image that we have in our head, what confidence looks like is not the only way.
Right. So I love this idea of confidence because, first of all, you want to appear confident. And quite honestly, that just takes practice. It's a skill that any of us can develop. But it is somewhat gendered, and sometimes female confidence looks a little different than male confidence. And so you want to recognize people who have great ideas, regardless of how their demeanor comes across, and not have a disconnect between what you expect. The thing about my book is how do you develop a culture with these characteristics? And you can develop a culture of confidence but one of the key things is to make sure people know how they're evaluated. So know what they're being measured on. If they know that they're supposed to deliver these key results, and they do, it does greatly increase their confidence.
Absolutely. And I think that people should not assume that in order to be seen confidence, they need to be muscular, loud, assertive, decisive. Like they don't need to exhibit a specific behavior in order to be seen confidence. And you could be confident when you're different. And companies also should adopt that and try to see different people with different behaviors and appreciate them.
Right. I mean, it's hard to change the culture overnight. I was recently at a large company and we were talking about confidence, and sometimes confidence looks differently in different people. You have to be careful about judging them based on their appearance. But for each of you, everyone who is listening to this, just embrace your confidence. Realize that you don't have to look like what other people look like. Understand, I got this. I really have this, and I will deliver.
Yes. And unfortunately, because sometimes leaders don't appreciate or don't see confidence in different flavors, women or other people, underrepresented groups get hurt by it, and their promotion are delayed and they get hurt. So what would you say for someone who feels like, yeah, I'm confident, but I'm a different kind of confident? How can they promote themselves?
Yes, I mean, you have to understand your culture and what is recognized where you work. I mean, there are times when it's just time to go somewhere else, but assuming that you want to be perceived as confident where you work, you need to understand what characteristics that look like and practice. I mean, I do think that often we don't realize that some of these are skills. And so the first time you try and practice confidence, you may be talking to your roommate or your partner or somebody else, and you learn to just make your point. And as you do that, as you practice, you will get more confident. One of the stories in the book was about Alan Eustace, who at the time was at Google, and he encouraged all these people to submit themselves for a promotion. And Raquel Romano, who also I interviewed, she didn't think that she would be promoted, and she was. I mean, that's one of the ways that you can encourage confidence, is to encourage people to put forward their ideas.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, I can share that I submitted myself for a manager position when I was 8 months pregnant, and I didn't even think I'll get it. Eventually I got it because I actually had someone who kind of advocated for me, and that kind of relates also to what we talked about, allies and having sponsors and having other people that support you, not just your manager.
Right. I mean, sponsors are one of those are really important. And there's, once again, going back to the social science, there's a lot of coverage that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. And finding somebody who, like you did, like your experience, that can speak about putting you forward for a position when you're not in the room, that's really what you want to be able to do. And if you want to develop a sponsor, you need to find people who have power of influence, who understand your work. I mean, what's most important is they understand what you can do so they can put your name forward.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for that, person who spoke on my behalf, I wouldn't get this opportunity for sure. It's just tricky, how do you, because you don't just go to someone and say, hey, will you be my sponsor? You kind of need to find those people to nurture the relationship with them.
Right. I mean, and often your sponsor is somebody you've known for a long time. I mean, my PhD advisor was my most important sponsor because after I graduated, he introduced me to entrepreneurs that were starting companies. And he put my name forward, and it made a huge difference. And if you talk to a lot of people, often their academic leader, somebody they knew at school, is somebody who can help them in a sponsor way. If you're trying to look for a sponsor, and it isn't cut and dried, you can't just follow step 1 and then follow step 2. But you can understand who has power and influence at your company, and then make sure that they know that what your work is, and spend the time to find out who you want to talk to and why your work is so important. And it takes, practice and continuing to show up. Another book that I talked about, Colin Paris, who at the time was the CTO at G, people gave him advice to be on all these task forces. And so he spent the time to get to know some cross-company committees. And people got to know him. And in one case, they became the sponsor.
Yeah, I think if I distill what you said, it's being deliberate, first of all, about it, right? That understanding that it is important not just to work and do what you're supposed to do, but also be intentional about building relationships, identifying those key stakeholders, those people with influence, and connecting with them, making sure that they know you, that they know your value, so they can support you.
Right. And finding connections. As I think about some of the sponsors of people that I know, they may be influential at the company, but they may have something in common. For many people, it's sports that they can talk about, but they find ways to have conversations with people they wouldn't normally have a conversation with. And once again, as you said, this is deliberate, and you have to take time and pay attention to it and continue to show up.
And I want to talk about specifically about people who are quiet and how they show up in loud rooms. This is especially very personal to me, because for me it was always very challenging to be vocal in meetings.
Yes. Yeah, I'm an introvert by nature. Kevin Scott talked a lot about this. He is an introvert. He's now the CTO at Microsoft. And early in his career, he would just sit back at meetings and not say something. And he was comfortable with that. He delivered other work, obviously, because he continued to be promoted, but he was savvy enough to see how it impacted the people on his team. So at meetings, he would pay attention to the people who were not speaking up, and he would call on them. He remembered how, as he became, the VP of engineering, the CTO, people just quit talking when he talked. And he realized that not everybody has that possibility in the meeting. So he would deliberately call on people. And that's something that you can do as a leader.
Sure. I use that strategy, I think that strategy without even knowing. Sometimes when I was participating in a meeting that I was afraid, I will not get a chance to speak, I was asking someone else, either was my manager or someone else, hey, can you make sure that you ask me as well, support me? Because it was very difficult for me to just jump in and say something.
Right. And it's my friend Nora Denzel always says, it isn't who you know, it's not what you know, it's who knows what you know. But your experience, Limor, is very common. Once again, this is practice, but you need to learn to speak up. And engineers think that by developing a great product that they will just be recognized for their work. And in many cases, that is not true. Understanding that many of the skills that you need to develop are the kind of things that you're talking about. Understanding how to speak up, and once again, practice it at home. Having other people in the room who reiterate what you just said, rather than taking credit for it. And these are all these approaches, these tactics that can help make a difference in getting your idea across.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to touch on is feedbacks. You mentioned women get less direct feedback. Why is that?
Well, there are some people, there are managers who are not that comfortable giving them feedback. And there's a saying that men are evaluated on potential and women are evaluated on outcomes. I mean, they really, they're judged on what they deliver. And it's, we have these modes. I mean, okay, so this is a woman, I expect her to do X, Y, Z, and this is a man. And it's changing some, but it is harder to learn to speak your truth, to show up. The way that it will change in terms of performance reviews and getting feedback is just time and energy. And as an employee, you should give your manager feedback if you see that happening in your performance reviews. Stand your ground. I mean, speak up your truth. Tell them that is what they're doing when you're looking at the feedback.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that I faced and also other, women I coach face is like they don't really get something tangible. Like, for example, one of the things I hated to receive was, Limor, you're doing great, because that didn't say anything to me.
That doesn't say anything, yeah.
And also when the feedback is very vague, like, oh, you need to be more strategic. I didn't know what to do with it.
Right. Yes, I mean, feedback like that, like you're saying, is not very helpful. But most performance reviews are conversations. And so asking for specific examples is always a way to approach your conversation. Asking for examples of where your manager thinks that you might be able to take on more responsibility. I mean, push back on whoever you're having the conversation with. No question.
Definitely. You have to push back and to ask them to be more specific. What does being strategic look like, for example?
And also look for role models, and many role models that I know. I mean, I'm always very much looking for female role models, but many of my mentors were men. Watch, see how people around you are being judged informally or formally. And I mean, you don't always know the private conversations, but see what works and figure out how to get your point across. I mean, it does take investment of time and energy.
Well, if you care about your career, you have to be investing time in that. I learned that like just doing your work most probably will not get you where you want.
Right.
So if you want to progress, you have to be intentional and invest.
As an introvert, as an engineer, there are many people who just feel like if they do good work, somebody will just show up in their cubicle. Yeah. And it's, I mean, one of the great myths of this whole industry. And you've got to be able to communicate your ideas. And without that, nothing's going to go forward.
Absolutely. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was about communities and specifically about ERGs, right? I mean, I know that I was involved in a women ERG and I know companies has them. Some of them maybe stopped investing in them in the past 2 years. How can ERGs actually be effective in accelerating?
I think that many of the companies that I know still have ERGs. I mean, they may change some of their language and things like that because of the feedback this year, but they still have ERGs. And if you take a step back and what is the purpose of the ERGs? Why do they support them? It's the chance to come together with people who you have something in common with. And I mean, I'm most familiar because of my background with the women's ERGs. And if you're one of just a few women and a large company, it's really challenging. And the chance to come together with people who, with other women, can really feed your soul. And you find that it's a place to come to have people that you can talk to. But most successful ERGs are also providing valuable advice. And so what I see is that small ERGs, so if you're at a startup, then all 10 women in the company, for example, might come together. And it's a chance to just find something in common. But as you scale, most of your programs will probably be large. I mean, I've spoken at a lot of large tech companies and they just have speakers for their entire women's ERG, for example. So it's really providing valuable feedback about how to move forward. You might have a speaker about careers. You might have a speaker of, some of the leaders from the company come in and talk about their perspective in terms of being inclusive.
For sure. Yeah, I was involved in several ERGs, like as a speaker, and also like I facilitated several kind of workshops, and I think it really helps. What I usually try to do is help them not just with content and obviously, help them answer questions, but connect them to each other. Like you said, like it's about being part of a group of like-minded women, or, it could be either affinity groups that are connected with each other. And then they can nurture the relationships and support each other.
Right. And I saw this with the Grace Hopper celebration. I mean, think about this. This is a conference that women came to because there weren't many women at their company. And when it was a much smaller conference, they would just have the chance to meet these other women, and communities just sprouted. I mean, it was pretty amazing. As the conference got larger and larger, it's harder to do anything that doesn't broadcast to the entire audience. But within the large framework, you find small groups still coming together. And once again, it's usually around a common goal. I mean, at the Grace Hopper conference, you might have groups coming together that are LGBTQ. You might have the women from the single companies. Microsoft would send women from across the entire organization, and they, there might be 10 of them. They make connections that they take back to their job. So I do think that often with communities, as they come together, there's the large, in ERGs too, group, but then there's also small groups, the 5 to 10 people that you get to know better. Years ago, the Lenient Circles are one of those places that pursued this. And it's a great idea where you have a small group of people that you meet together with on a regular basis, and you learn together and you help each other advance. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I've been in Grace Hopper many years ago. Yeah, I was sent there also by the company, and first of all, I was amazed. Like, my goodness, so many women. Where did they come from? And yes, like you mentioned, Telle, it was like we were maybe 10 women from the same company. I didn't know any of them before we went there. Although each one of us came from a different location, and it was, I think that year it was in Houston, and we met and we bonded, and then we stayed connected even after I left that company. So it was really incredible to bond. And I felt very privileged that I was sent there by the company.
Right. I mean, that's a great example of what can happen. I mean, so thank you for sharing it. You come together, you don't know these people, you get to know each other, and then you develop a bond. And in many cases, you keep showing up.
Yeah, so definitely, I know that you still haven't lined up everything for 2026. I mean, in Grace Hopper, but definitely companies should be looking up on sending their women there, because it's an incredible experience.
It is, no question about it. And my job, I stepped down at the end of 2017, but all these women would come to the conference and tell me, they'd find me in the hallway and they say, this changed my life. It is that moment of realizing there was other possibilities that has such an impact. And I have a lot of experience with Grace Hopper celebration, but that's what you can see sometimes with the ERGs. If you're at a startup or a company, you come together and all of a sudden you realize there's a different way to approach your creativity and contribute to the company.
Do you still attend Grace Hopper celebrations?
I did. I was supposed to go this year. I mentioned at the beginning of this interview that I had an accident, so I had to cancel, sadly. But I have attended many, and I expected to attend 2025. I'm looking at attending 2026. So
it should be relatively close to you, right? It's in California. It's in Anaheim.
I think it is in California. Yes.
Yes, Southern California, but still not that far from you.
No, pretty close.
Short flight away. Yeah. So wonderful. What's next for you, Telle? Before we end today, what's next for you?
Well, right now I'm in the throes of continuing to talk about my book. And there's nothing more satisfying than talking about the ideas in Rebooting Tech Culture with a group of women who are really taking that next step in their career. I also serve on the board of a couple of nonprofits, in particular AI for All, which is creating the next generation of AI leadership. Once again, what I'm really interested in looking at leadership differently and creating those next generations. So anything that I can do on that front is something that I'm spending my time on.
Wonderful. That's incredible. Thank you so much, Telle, for today. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, Limor, it's really nice to meet you, and I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Telle, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I want to ask you for a favor. I want From a Woman to a Leader to reach more women and more leaders who care about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So share it with anyone that this conversation can help. And before you go, I want to share the episode next week. I'm super excited because this is my first in-person recording. So this podcast exists for almost 3 years, and this is the first time I actually recorded in person. So next week, I am sharing an episode with Lisa Zaitik, and she is the founding partner and executive chief of staff at AppsFlyer. We actually recorded the episode in the AppsFlyer beautiful offices in Herzliya, and it was fun. It was really an incredible experience. And in the episode with her, we talked about career transitions, and those especially that don't come with confidence first. Because Lisa made a lot of transitions in her career. And we talk about what to do when you feel completely unqualified for the role you were offered, and you need to focus on impact instead of confidence, and that can change everything for you. So if you feel underestimated, unsure, you're not sure if it's the right time to grow, move on, switch careers, or maybe switch roles, this episode is going to help you. I assure you that. So make sure you subscribe to From a Woman to a Leader, share it with any woman who needs it, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.